James, a software developer, decided to spend the weekend alone in his childhood home, a large, aging farmhouse on the outskirts of town. His parents had moved to a retirement community and the house was left empty. A massive storm rolled in, blanketing the area in darkness and relentless rain. James settled in, enjoying the nostalgia of his old home. He spent the evening working on his laptop in the living room, the sound of the rain providing a soothing backdrop. However, strange noises from the basement began to interrupt his concentration. He heard faint tapping, followed by an eerie, scratching sound. Ignoring the noises at first, James tried to focus on his work, but as the hours passed, the sounds grew louder and more insistent. Finally, he decided to investigate, thinking a tree branch or animal might be causing the disturbance. Armed with a flashlight, he opened the basement door and descended the creaky stairs. The basement was cold and damp, filled with old furniture and boxes. As he scanned the room, his flashlight flickered and went out, plunging him into darkness. Panicking, James tried to make his way back upstairs, but the basement door slammed shut, trapping him inside. The air grew colder and he felt a sinister presence around him. He heard whispers in a language he couldn't understand, followed by a low growl. Suddenly, the flashlight flickered back on, revealing a shadowy figure standing in the corner. It had no discernible features, just a dark, menacing shape. James backed away, but the entity moved closer, its growl growing louder. He stumbled over a box and fell, the flashlight rolling out of his hand. Desperate, James remembered a story his grandmother used to tell about a malevolent spirit trapped in the house's basement. She had said that the spirit could be warded off with a special incantation written in her old diary, which was kept in the basement. James scrambled to find the diary, his hands shaking as he searched through the boxes. The entity was nearly upon him, its presence oppressive and terrifying. Just as it reached out to grab him, he found the diary and recited the incantation aloud. The entity let out a deafening scream and dissipated into the shadows. The temperature in the basement returned to normal, and the door creaked open. James, breathing heavily, grabbed the diary and fled upstairs, not daring to look back. He spent the rest of the night in his car, too scared to re-enter the house. The next morning, he called a moving company and decided to sell the house. The farmhouse remained empty, gaining a reputation among locals as a haunted place. James never spoke of his encounter, but he warned anyone who considered buying the house to stay away from the basement. The entity's presence lingered, a dark shadow waiting for its next victim in the bowels of the old farmhouse. Jake, a young professional, rented an old cottage on the outskirts of town for a weekend retreat. He needed a break from his hectic city life and thought the isolation would be perfect for unwinding. The cottage, surrounded by dense woods, was charming but had an eerie vibe, especially with the storm brewing outside. On his first night, as the rain hammered against the roof, Jake explored the cottage. He found an antique mirror in one of the bedrooms, its surface tarnished and frame ornate. The mirror fascinated him, though it gave him an odd feeling. Later that night, while reading in the living room, Jake saw something strange in the reflection of the mirror. At first, it was a fleeting shadow, but it grew clearer each time he glanced at it. The reflection seemed to show another room, one filled with old furniture and an unsettling atmosphere. He tried to ignore it, attributing it to his imagination. But then he heard faint whispers coming from the mirror. The whispers grew louder, forming words that begged for help. Jake was unnerved but felt compelled to investigate further. As the storm intensified, Jake decided to cover the mirror, but it seemed impossible. Every time he approached, the air around it grew icy, and the whispers turned into agonized cries. Finally, he mustered the courage to confront whatever was trapped in the mirror. He touched the mirror's surface, and suddenly, he was pulled into the reflection, finding himself in the room he had seen earlier. It was cold and dimly lit, with an overwhelming sense of dread. He realized he was in the past, trapped in the same house but in a different time. Jake saw the ghostly figure of a man, his face filled with despair. The man explained that he had been cursed to live in the mirror after a failed occult ritual. The only way to break the curse was for someone from the outside to take his place. The ghost advanced on Jake, trying to force him into the mirror's depths. Jake fought back, desperately searching for a way out. He found a journal detailing the ritual and discovered that destroying the mirror would end the curse. With no other option, he smashed the mirror's surface and everything went black. Jake awoke in the living room, the mirror shattered on the floor. The storm had passed, and the house was silent. He gathered his things and left the cottage, never to return. The locals avoided the place, calling it the Haunted Mirror Cottage, a place where reality and the supernatural blurred, trapping anyone who dared to look too closely. Emily, a writer seeking inspiration, rented a remote cabin in the woods. The rainstorm outside was torrential, isolating her further in the already secluded location. She relished the solitude, believing it would help her focus on her work. On her first night, Emily felt uneasy. The rain pounded on the roof and the wind howled through the trees. As she sat by the fireplace, she felt a chill that had nothing to do with the weather. It was as if someone was watching her. She brushed off the feeling, but it persisted. Strange symbols appeared on the windows, drawn in the condensation. Her belongings were moved around and the atmosphere grew heavier with each passing hour. She discovered a box of old photographs in the attic, each one showing a faceless figure standing in various parts of the cabin. Emily realized the figure was the source of her unease. She researched the cabin's history and found no records, but local legend spoke of a malevolent spirit bound to the place, targeting anyone who stayed there alone. The figure became more tangible, appearing in the shadows and attacking Emily physically. One night, the figure lunged at her, its faceless form terrifyingly close. Emily fought back, grabbing a poker from the fireplace and swinging wildly. She managed to fend it off, but the figure seemed to dissolve into the shadows. Emily grabbed her belongings and fled the cabin in the pouring rain. She drove away as fast as she could, the faceless figure watching her from the window. She never looked back, sharing her story as a warning to others. The cabin remained abandoned, a place of dark legend. The faceless watcher continued its vigil, waiting for the next unfortunate soul to seek solitude in its cursed walls. The locals spoke of the cabin in hushed tones, warning others to stay away from the haunted place deep in the woods. Story 4. The Echoing Screams. Megan, a high school student, found herself alone on a stormy night in her family's new home. They had recently moved to this quiet, rural area for a fresh start. The house, a large Victorian, had stood empty for years before they bought it. Megan's parents were away on a business trip, leaving her to experience her first night alone in the unfamiliar house. As the rain lashed against the windows and thunder roared, Megan tried to concentrate on her homework. However, strange noises kept distracting her. At first, she heard faint whispers, but she dismissed them as the wind. Then came the unmistakable sound of footsteps upstairs. Despite her fear, Megan decided to investigate. She grabbed a flashlight and crept up the old staircase, each step creaking loudly. She checked every room but found nothing. Just as she was about to head back downstairs, she heard a scream. It was blood-curdling and seemed to come from the attic. Megan hesitated but decided to uncover the source of the scream. She found the attic door slightly ajar and pushed it open. The attic was dark and filled with old furniture covered in dusty sheets. As she moved deeper into the room, the air grew colder and the flashlight flickered. Suddenly, she felt a presence behind her. Turning around, she saw a shadowy figure. It was a ghostly apparition of a woman, her face twisted in agony. The woman screamed again, a sound that seemed to echo through the walls. Megan tried to run, but the door slammed shut, trapping her inside. The ghost revealed its tragic story. She was a former resident who had been murdered by her jealous husband. Her spirit had been trapped in the house, reliving her final moments over and over. The ghost grew more agitated, the temperature dropping further as it advanced on Megan. In a desperate bid for survival, Megan shouted that she would help the spirit find peace. This moment of bravery seemed to calm the ghost. The attic door suddenly flew open, and Megan fled downstairs, the ghost's wails following her. She ran out into the storm, seeking refuge with a neighbor who called the police. The authorities found no evidence of the ghost, but Megan's terror was real. Her family moved out immediately, and the house remained abandoned. Locals now say the house is haunted by the ghost's echoing screams, a place where no one dares to stay.